In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let us put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. Lord, graciously give us your Holy Spirit. Guide us from within. Give us your light, your discernment. Enkindle our heart with the fire of your Holy Spirit. And we ask you this through the powerful intercession of Our Lady, who is always present among us. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and in the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to this new series, or new book, more precisely. We finished last time book 2 of the Dark Night, and we will, if you remember well, we skipped Ascent of Mount Carmel, book 3, which addresses the purification, the active purification of the memory and the will, and we went directly to from Ascent, book 2, which addresses the purification of the mind, the active one. We went directly to book 2 in Dark Night, which addresses the equivalent stage of growth, but God's response. So on one hand, the ascent shows us what we are supposed to do, and for 2 different stages, the beginners and then the advanced, the proficients. And the same thing, the 2 books of the Dark Night, book 1 and book 2, show us the God's response for the 2 stages, beginner and proficient. Now, I didn't want initially to immediately do read and comment book 3 of Ascent of Mount Carmel, because I didn't want, the book 2 was very long, and he himself considers book 2 as the foundation of book 3, and in a way it explains at least the general laws of the functioning he recommends. And also he considers that since the mind and faith are the beginning and the foundation, that it's not that book 3 is less important, but that already he gave the essence. This is why I didn't want to delay too much. After a very long book 2 of Ascent of Mount Carmel, I decided to move to Dark Night, book 2, to see God's response and enjoy God's work, discover God's work as a response to our effort of faith and purity of faith. Now we finished that book 2 of the Dark Night, and I think we have to complete and finish the Ascent of Mount Carmel, and therefore we need to read and comment book 3 of the Ascent of Mount Carmel. So I hope you understand. Now it will be numbered as 4, Roman numeral 4, while Dark Night book 2 was numbered 5, Roman numeral 5. So I hope people will be able to understand where we are. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 is Ascent of Mount Carmel, book 1. 2 is Dark Night, book 1. Then 3 is Ascent, book 2. 4, which is what we are starting right now, is book 3 of Ascent. And then 5 is Dark Night, which we just, book 2, which is what we just finished. So I hope also that the people who are watching will take into consideration the fact that we did book 2 of Dark Knight before what we are about to do right now, which is book 3 of Ascent of Mount Carmel. I hope you find yourself in that. All the structure of the 5 books is explained in the very beginning of this very long course. So without further ado, if you don't mind, we will start reading and commenting this book 3 of the Ascent of Mount Carmel. I'm about to share the portion of screen. Here it is, Ascent of Mount Carmel. As you can see here, book 3. As usual, I have the English on the left and the Spanish on my right. Now, just for you to know, this book itself, which is dedicated to the active purification of the memory and the will, is itself divided in 2. As you can see here, chapters 1 through to 15 are for he's teaching us the pure act of the memory, which is the act of hope, the pure act of hope. And the chapters 16 through to 45, which shows you it's a bit long, he then explains the act of charity and the purity in the act of charity, because as you know, the charity falls in the faculty of the will. Okay, so I hope this is clear. If you have any questions regarding the structure, the this and that, please don't hesitate. Grab your mic and ask me the question, because I might forget maybe something that I think is obvious, but it's not. So as you can see here, this is video for Roman numeral, and it's the first video of this series. So, book 3 of the Ascent of Mount Carmel. First chapter, chapter 1, which treats of the purgation or purification of the active night of the memory and will. Remember, when we say active, it means our part with the general help of the grace of God. God gives us usually, constantly, his general help to allow us to do what we are supposed to do in order to receive his grace or himself. So when John of the Cross says active, he intends to talk to us. It's about our work. When he says passive, he is describing what God does. I explained that many times, but it's never too much to clarify this or remind that. He gives the instruction, in Spanish is doctrina, which is doctrine, how the soul is to behave with respect to the apprehensions. Apprehensions are perceptions, if you want, which fall into the memory. Memory for the for hope, and the will would be for the charity. So, to the apprehensions of these 2 faculties, there are things which fall, this is me talking here, things which fall into the memory, our memory, and things which fall into our will. So he wants to tell us, to teach us, to show us the way how to behave. Como se ha de haber el alma, como se ha de haber el alma, how to behave with respect to what could fall in the memory and what could fall in the will. That it may. So what is the goal? You see, always, 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 St. John of the Cross never loses sight of the goal. Never. You see here from first page of this book 3, he reminds us, where are we going? Where are we heading? Come to union with God. We want to reach union. He doesn't have 2 or 3 or 4 goals. He has one goal, and he wants all our energy and determination to reach that goal. He shows us the way to reach that goal. Nothing else occupies his mind. He lives in this world, but nothing else occupies his mind. He wants us to be united to God, to reach that fullness of union, spiritual marriage, and so forth. Union of love. So to come to union with God according to the two faculties. Of course, we don't go only with two faculties, we go with all our being, and essentially with the three faculties: the mind through faith, memory through hope, and will through love or charity. According to the two faculties aforementioned, in perfect hope and charity. You see here, I underlined perfect. That's the goal. We want this purification. We want this purification. We want the quality of our hope and charity to be perfect, or pure if you prefer. So this is the goal. He's teaching us the proper means in these two, or the purity of these two acts, the act of hope and the act of charity. Chapter 1. The first faculty of the soul, which is the mind, and we saw that in book 2 of Ascent of Mount Carmel, has now been instructed. We've done that. You can go back to the series of videos, series number 3. You can see all this book read and explained. Through all its apprehensions. We have been instructed through all its apprehensions. It's 30 something chapters. I don't remember now, 39 or 40, 41. Through all its apprehensions. So apprehensions is anything that you get in the mind. In the first theological virtue, which is faith, to the end that according to this faculty, the soul may be united with God by means of the purity of faith. Beautiful sentence. Beautiful sentence. So that the soul may be united with God. What is the means of union? The three theological acts. And they need to be pure. So this is the means of the purity of faith. La pureza, de pureza de fe. It now remains to do likewise with respect to the other two faculties of the soul, the memory and the will, and to purify them likewise with respect to their apprehensions. So you see, we have a role, we have something to do in order to achieve this purity. We have our part to play, and it's important, and this is why this teaching is important. If this teaching wasn't important, it would be because we just read and we don't have anything to do. While this book, like book 1 and book 2, but at different levels, is meant, this teaching, this doctrine, as he calls it, is meant to teach us how to purify the way we remember, in this case, or we love later on. So, and to purify them likewise with respect to their apprehensions. Likewise, the mind with faith, with respect to their apprehension, to the end that according to these faculties also, is almost the introduction here that we have here, to the end. We have it here again. To the end that according to these two faculties, memory, a good way of, or a pure way of acting in memory, and will, the soul may come to union with God in perfect hope and charity. Of course, this is the human part, and human part is not enough. Even if you do the maximum you can do, this is only 1 in front of 100, which is God's reaction. We need to have 1. The total addition is 101. 101 is our effort plus 100, so to speak. It's an image I'm using, which the gospel is using. No, if you do one thing, God gives you 100-fold. Means spiritual, means His grace, means an effect and a result that no human power can achieve. So Okay, remember always this. We do our part, but we still want God, hope and know that God will do his part, which is absolutely necessary. So total 101. This is me talking, of course, the 101, not St. John of the Cross. I'm just sort of quoting the gospel my way. This will briefly be effected in this third book. I like this briefly, no? Remember, here we are 45 chapters, and he calls this briefly. God knows what it would be without this briefly. We have now concluded our treatment of the mind, book 2, which is the receptacle of all other objects according to its mode of operation. Spanish is en su manera, its way. And in treating of this, we have gone a great part of the whole way. You see, this is why I had the audacity to say, okay, let us, after finish this book 2, let us move on to Dark Knight book 2. He's always indirectly allowing us to do that, but still he considers that it will be useful. So in treating this, which means the mind and faith and purity of faith, we have gone a great part of the whole way which leads to union, which depends on us, the way that depends on us. It is therefore unnecessary for us to write at equal length with respect to these faculties. Well, come on, I mean, 45 chapters still is long. It's not as equal, because it would be the double, but still, he is halving the length, if you want. For it is not possible that if the spiritual man instructs his mind in faith, according to the doctrine which has been given him, he should not, in so doing, instruct the other two faculties in the other two virtues likewise. It's not possible that he should not. It means he has to. For the operations of each faculty depends upon the others. He's explaining why faith would have been enough, because the two others depend on faith. Faith is the door, the entrance door. They are the access, the door which allows us to access God. The faith is the beginning. Without faith, we can't really draw closer to God, says the scriptures. But since, in order to follow our manner of procedure, and in order to that we may be the better understood, we must necessarily speak of the proper and determinate matter. We shall here be obliged to set down the apprehensions proper to each faculty, memory and will. And first those of the memory, making here such distinction between them as suffices for our purpose. This we shall be able to deduce from the distinction between their objects, which are three. So he will start with the memory, and he will distinguish subsections, if you want, subcategories. One would be natural, one would be imaginary, and one would be spiritual. So the categories of what falls in the memory is natural, imaginary, and spiritual. He will explain. In fact, the three of them will be supernatural, will be spiritual, but the origin from where it comes is natural, imaginary, or spiritual. We did see a little bit this in book 2. According to which there are likewise three kinds of knowledge which come from the memory, namely natural and supernatural, imaginary and spiritual. The commentator, not me, I think it's Alison Pierce, if I'm not wrong, says here that the three of them are supernatural, when we deduce that from what will come after. So they are all coming from a supernatural source, but one is using the natural means in us, one is using the imaginary one, and one is using the spiritual one. He will explain all this, so don't worry, just be patient. All these, by the divine favor, we shall treat here in due course, beginning with natural knowledge, which pertains to the most exterior objects. And we shall then treat of the affections of the will. This is now the chapters from 16 onward, wherewith we shall conclude this third book of the active spiritual night. Okay, any questions here? Chapter 2, which reads of the natural apprehensions, and the first category is natural apprehensions of the memory, whatever falls in the memory from in a natural way, if you want, and describes how the soul must be voided, emptied, vafiar, emptied, of them in order to be able to attain to union with God according to this faculty. Otherwise, it's a bit dislocated. If you help the mind to make their pure act of faith and you don't help the rest, you could get astray. It's like creating a dislocation in us. So you see, he never loses sight of the goal, union with God. It is necessary that in each of these books, the reader, book 2 and book 3, the reader should bear in mind the purpose of which we are speaking. Purpose, the goal. El propósito. For otherwise there may arise within him many such questions with respect to what he is reading as might by this time be occurring to him with respect to what we have said to the mind. He wants us to remember what he said to the mind, and this is an allusion to all the chapters, the first chapters of the book 2. The 9 first chapters of Ascent book 2, he's just thinking about them, and he would like us to remember what he said then, because he laid the rules or the understanding for the reasons why he wants us to empty completely. And shall say now of the memory, and afterwards shall say of the will. So he is not repeating, he will not repeat what he said in the 9 first chapters of Ascent of Mount Carmel. I will not do that, of course, but this is where he lays the reasons why he will be so radical. So see what he's about to say here. For seeing how we annihilate the faculties, am I pronouncing it properly? I think no. Annihilate, I say annihilate. Is it annihilate? Correct? Yeah, okay. No?
Annihilate.
Annihilate. You see, I thought I knew I was wrong here, because you corrected me once and then, but still I forget. Sorry. I am at an age where it's difficult to learn. Foreseeing how we annihilate the faculties with respect to their operations. So this is important. This is an objection. People will see that he's too radical. This is why many people open his books and close them again immediately after, because they say, no, that's not for me. It's too much. Or some people, even some modern people, some modern commentators might not want to underline the radical choices of John of the Cross. Maybe they fear the reader will not read their book or buy their book, or maybe they never saw why it is so radical and they never put into practice why it's so radical. I don't know, but I'm just trying to and it's not only our time, it's also his time. This is why he's writing. These are texts written in the 16th century in Spain. And he also knew that some readers will be reluctant, will have objections. So it's not only the modern time. Every time in history, every generation has a little bit of modern and old. foreseeing how we annihilate the faculties with respect to their operations, it may perhaps seem to him, a person, that we are destroying the road of spiritual practice. So that's the reaction from learned people and not non-learned people. Learned people and non-learned people, they will feel that we are destroying the road of spiritual practice rather than constructing it. This is the reaction that they will have in front of his choices. This would be true if we were seeking here only to instruct beginners. He's not talking to beginners. And this is one of the sides of his answer to us. If we are talking to beginners, and here is very interesting. This is why, for instance, in the School of Mary, we have year 1, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, or year 1, year 2, and year 3. Why? Because the language changes. And he's about to show us right now how the language and the advice change from one stage to the other. He says, if we were beginners, like just having had our conversion, second conversion, we are advised to use certain means of meditation, for instance. And meditation, you have to extract certain lights and so forth. And it's normal to have some understanding about faith. Do you follow me? So you will remember certain notions of your faith. You are a beginner and you need that. You need that. While the advanced person, the proficient, reaches a point where he or she doesn't need these things because he already had them, and now he or she is entering a new phase. So you see how the advice changes radically, almost 180 degrees. When you are asking him to meditate and do certain exercises because they are adapted to his need, to his weakness. He talks about the milk. St. Paul talks about the milk. St. John of the Cross talks about the milk, which is a sweeter and more gentle food. It's not the solid food, you see. So this is very important here to remember. We know it, but it's just to remember that fact, that the advice you give is not a general advice. And this is the sad thing, is that our understanding of spiritual life in general in the church is sort of monolinear, which means this is the advice, everybody needs to abide with this advice. No. To a beginner, you give this advice. To a proficient, you give almost 180 degree different advice. So this means what? This means that we need to discern. You don't teach to any person anything, whatever crosses your mind. You need to know to whom you are talking. Are you talking to a beginner? Then you have to give a certain means, certain ways of praying, and so forth. This is mandatory. You cannot guide them immediately to something very high because you will destroy them. They will lose faith. They will lose hope. While a proficient, your teaching changes completely, because if you continue, and listen carefully, if you continue to lead them with the apprehensions of the beginner, then they start to go in circles. I hope everybody hears John of the Cross here. Why do we go in circles? Because we don't understand that there is growth and that the food changes. We don't understand that discernment is needed. We neglect the fact of trying to understand where this person is. We think that, okay, fine, all have to meditate in the same way, all have to pray in the same way. Completely wrong. But it requires too much effort that the majority renounce to do that. Out of ignorance, out of lack of effort, out of I don't know what. I'm not judging anybody. I'm just describing the facts. So it requires a lot of effort to say, okay, with whom are we dealing with here? Who is this person? It's much easier to give a general advice. Much easier. While in fact, before talking, you need to listen to know who is this person? Where is this person on the journey? Roughly, you're not really with the microscope trying to know exactly at the millimeter where the person is, but roughly, where is the person? What is the right food for this person? Is it the right time to talk this language? This is a new language. This is a doctrine, as he called it. This is a spiritual doctrine of a certain quality. You can't go outside and say, hey guys, this is, let me tell you what John of the Cross says. No, what John of the Cross says changes according to the person who is in front of you. Absolutely. You cannot say, this is the doctrine of St. John of the Cross. That would be completely foolish to say that. The doctrine of St. John of the Cross depends on whom are we talking to. If you're talking to a beginner, the advice is this way. If you're talking to a proficient as he understands it, not proficient as we understand it. There's a big difference. If we are talking about a proficient according to what he says, the language changes completely. Imagine you're talking to somebody who is even more advanced than a proficient, rather closer to perfection or after union and so forth. You'll be talking about something else. This food is different from that one, different from that one. Even though our faith seems to be the same, but we do not have the same food. So I hope this starts to change our binary way of dealing in Christianity. Are you in state of grace? Well, then you can receive communion. If you're not in state of grace, God forbid, of course, you go to confession and then you can receive communion, and then you wait until you die. Try to be a good Catholic, try to be a good Christian, and that's it. This is all the advice we have. Pray and be careful and behave and be morally sound and so forth, and that's it. You'll be fine. I'm sorry, but at least that's not what he's saying, okay? I'm trying to explain. So, again, he's saying, what is he saying? He hears an objection coming from spiritual directors, from spiritual masters. What do they say? They say to him, you are annihilating the faculties because you are asking them to be emptied. He says, this would be right if it was a beginner. I can't ask the beginner to be empty because the beginner, I need to fill him with something. Otherwise, he won't cross this stage. He will stay beginning in his beginner stage. He will be in the beginning of it. So he heard the objection. You are destroying the path. He says, yes, I would be destroying if I'm talking to a beginner, but I'm not talking to a beginner. So these books cannot, so to speak, this doctrine, so to speak, cannot fall in the hands of people who are beginners, because it will damage their life. This is what he is saying, not me. Read the text with me. This is what he says. This is the objection. If you do this, if you ask people to empty, as you are doing right now, this is destroying the road. This is his word, not me. Destroying the road, which means you are not helping the person. This is very, very serious issue, what we are addressing right now. And in Spanish is the same. Quizá la parecerá que antes destruimos. Destroy, destruimos. The same expression. Rather than constructing. Okay? Yeah. El camino del ejercicio espiritual que le edificamos. Instead of edifying or constructing, we are destroying. So, yes, this would be true if we were seeking here only to instruct beginners who are best prepared through these apprehensible and discursive apprehensions. So he is not saying, no, guys, you are wrong. He says, you are right. If we're talking about the beginners, if he imagine John of the Cross is talking, he says, I support and I consider that it is important, best prepared. What do you want more than that? Best prepared through these apprehensive and discursive apprehensions. A beginner, you invite him or her to use meditation. And what is meditation? Is to think, meditate, to think about a spiritual subject, about something that belongs to God, and to go from one thought to the other, to read the gospel and to think about what he or she, about what the gospel is saying, you see? So you are, as he says here, filling your mind and your memory with knowledge. Catechesis, for instance, no? Catechesis, you need to know. But since we are giving instructions to those who progress further in contemplation. Now, I'm not sure that the translation renders properly the Spanish. This is why I put here the Spanish. Since we are here giving what? A doctrine, doctrina, para pasar, which I'm not sure the English gives that nuance. The doctrine corresponds to a passage, but it is also pushing toward this change. Para pasar adelante, en contemplación a unión. You see, while the English says those who would progress further in contemplation.
You would say maybe in order to?
Yeah. Giving instruction in order to move forward to contemplation, to enter in contemplation. And you see here, contemplation, it doesn't mean that the person didn't receive any graces before, but they were in form of apprehension. He doesn't say that. In form of apprehensions. Apprehensions are fruit either of the brain, the mind working by itself with the general help of God, or sometimes God can give some lights. But is this the new contemplation he's talking about? We already addressed that before, no? That there are different levels of contemplation. Now he wants a deeper contemplation. We're talking about a purer contemplation, if you will. Okay? So, to which end all of these means and exercises of sense, the first one, the apprehensions, concerning the faculties, memory and will, must recede into the background. In Spanish, it says atrás, but atrás, I think, can be read in different ways. In Spanish, it says, han de quedar atrás y en silencio. The translator found atrás, quedar atrás, to stay in the background, to go in the background. I hope I'm not wrong, but I am inclined to think that atrás could also mean the past. It means in the back, which means we passed through that, it's finished in this sense. But I leave it there. So all these means and exercises of sense concerning the faculties then become something of the past. This is how I read atrás in this case, no? Han de quedar atrás y en silencio. But I will not say I'm right or he's wrong. No. And put to silence. So the means and exercises of sense. So when you meditate, you use the sense and the means. Of course, you receive lights, God gives you things, but still you are working, actively working. He said, no, this now should stay in the back or in the past and put into silence. These exercises, means and exercises. Exercises of sense. And Spanish is a little bit better. It says ejercicios sensitivos, which means the faculties are exercised in a sensual way. Ejercicios sensitivos de potencias. to the end that God may of his own accord work divine union in the soul. So if I am filling myself through the means and exercise, sensual exercises, with these apprehensions, fruits of my meditations, I'm not progressing. If I'm supposed to start progressing here, I'm supposed to enter in a new phase. Why? Because I will be hindering the action of God. Why? Because two things that are different cannot stay in the same place. So it's either or. So God won't be able to give the necessary contemplation which leads to union, deeper contemplation. So it is necessary to proceed by this method or style, estilo, of disencumbering and emptying, desembarazando y vaciando the soul and causing it to reject the natural jurisdiction and operations of the faculties. The natural jurisdiction and operations of the faculties, which means remembering, making an effort, learning the notions of our faith and so forth. They are stored in the memory. All this is natural jurisdictions and operations of the faculty, so that they may become capable. In Spanish, it is be replaced by. Yes, replaced by, para que se dé lugar. I think it's sorry, I do apologize. The text says become capable, while the Spanish translated literally means be replaced by an infusion and illumination from supernatural sources. So I would cross this and keep here be replaced by. Of course, we have to change completely the thing. I'm not doing it right now. Okay, infusion and illumination from supernatural sources. You see, replaced, not become capable, replaced, para que se dé lugar a que sean infundidas y ilustradas de lo sobrenatural. Be replaced by an infusion or the infusion and illumination from supernatural sources. Lo sobrenatural, not sources, but anyway, for their capacity. It's not natural, but we understand that it's natural, cannot attain to so lofty an experience. So that's the main point here. If I don't stop the natural way of functioning, natural means here using the general help of the grace of God. If I don't stop that, I won't attain something that is so lofty, so much, much higher. If I don't abandon what is base or low, if you want, I won't gain what is higher, but will rather hinder it if it be not disregarded. And thus, if it be true, as it is, that the soul must proceed in its growing knowledge of God by knowing that which it is not rather than which it is. The translator said he. I would like to keep he and it because the Spanish is not clear. The Spanish says, siendo verdad como lo es, que a Dios el alma antes le ha de ir conociendo por lo que no es que por lo que es. Lo is it God? Is it what is? So it's interesting here. We go toward God, we go to God through not knowing or through rejecting what we already know. What does it mean? In the beginning of my first stage as a beginner, I am filling my mind and my memory with what he calls apprehensions, knowledge. I need that. Then when I enter in this new phase, and this is very common to the fathers of the church in the early centuries of Christianity, you know, the way of negation, apophatic if you prefer. So now I'm going to God not through what I know, but through what I don't know. I know many things that tell me something about God. So here, if I go to God, I'm going through what I know. But after knowing these things that could lead me to God, I start to say, but God is even further higher than this. So I am going to God through what I don't know. You see? So through what is not, what doesn't exist, which it means it's not known. I hope you understand this, no? It's the negation. I start with the affirmation. I know this about God. This is the meditation proper to the beginner. Then the beginner will have to move to what? To negating what he knows. Says, no, that's not God. I know that initially that is God. God is holy. God is this. God is that. But what is holiness? Holiness is something much higher. So I say, okay, I don't know what is holiness. So in order to really attain God, I negate what I already acquired before. So that's the apophatic, called apophatic way. I draw closer to God, not from what I know, but from or through what I don't know. Knowing that which it is not, rather than which it is. In order to come to him, it must proceed by renouncing and rejecting to the very uttermost everything in its apprehensions that is possible to renounce, whether this be natural or supernatural. It's very radical here. His desire to tell us to renounce to all of that has been received. That's strong, I would say, no? And you could hear objections. So it's funny, no? You instruct the Christian, the faithful in the beginning, through catechesis to many things, and the person has the impression to know. Then you reach a new phase where you say to the person, all what you know, just leave it there. God is beyond all this. The truth is even beyond or higher than this. Not against it, but totally different. So remember this. Must proceed by knowing that which is not, rather than which it is. Ir conociendo por lo que no es que por lo que es. We shall proceed with this end in view with regard to the memory. So he keeps this in his mind. We want to empty the memory. We have this view, and we will proceed with it, drawing it out from its natural state and limitations. He wants the memory to leave, to abandon its limitations in order to be filled by God himself and nothing less than God himself, and causing it to rise above itself. I know things, I belong to this level, and this level is limited. I'm now need to open and allow to be elevated. That is above all distinct knowledge. You remember what distinct? We always said that distinct for him is all that which falls in the conscious mind, or here in our case, memory and will. So anything that is distinct means below the spirit, all that falls into the conscious soul. So we need to rise above itself, that is above all distinct knowledge and apprehensible possession, in supreme hope of God, who is incomprehensible. So you see, the language he's using, the teaching, the doctrine he's offering is very different from the beginning. The beginning you teach people, God is holy, God is this, God is that. But then suddenly you say, no, he is really incomprehensible. He is really beyond our means. I So this means I have to, all what I learned and I thought I knew as a beginner, I need to abandon it and accept something that is beyond what I know, beyond my means, beyond what my memory can receive and accumulate. Now, natural knowledge. So that was general teaching. Now he will address the natural knowledge, what he calls the apprehensions received through natural knowledge. Beginning then with natural knowledge, I say that natural knowledge in the memory consists of all kinds of knowledge that the memory can form concerning the objects of the 5 bodily senses, namely hearing, sight, smell, taste, and touch, and all kinds of knowledge of this type which it is possible to form and fashion. Be careful here, there's something maybe it's not clear for us modern readers. Let me give you one example. Remember, he addressed it in the book 2. He says if somebody has a vision, physical vision, like I'm seeing, I don't know, I'm seeing a saint or an angel. For him, it's natural. Of course, for us, we say, no, this is spiritual, this is given by God. He doesn't question that. But what he's saying is that the manifestation in this vision is using vision. We are used to see bodies. So if God appears in a body, or an angel appears in a body, or a saint appears in a body, he considers this natural, which means it's a common experience for us in this sense, you see? So this is the meaning what he has in mind when he said natural. He's not saying that it's not discussing coming from God or what, but he's discussing that the fact that since it is a vision or an apparition, I'm seeing something physical. This corresponds to my normal natural knowledge coming from the sense of seeing, no sight. You see, this is why he says to form and fashion. It's formed using all of these forms and kinds of knowledge. The soul must strip. Here again, this famous expression he uses, which is desnudar. Desnudes. This is the expression, verb or word that he coined. And void itself, and it must strive to lose the imaginary apprehension of them, so that there may be left in it, in the faculty, no kind of impression of knowledge, no trace of aught soever, but rather the soul must remain barren and bare. Barren and bare. Calva y rasa. As if these forms had never passed through it, and in total oblivion and suspension. It reminds me, but this is me talking, not him, of when Jesus says, it's better for you that I go. When he talks in the Last Supper in the Gospel of St. John, and chapters 13 through to 17, but he talks to them through to 16. He says, it's better for you to go, so it's better for me to disappear. It's better for you that I go, I disappear. Yes, please go ahead.
I'm not really seeing the difference here between the mind and memory, like the faculty.
Yeah.
In the sense of what's the difference?
Exactly, you will see it in below. This is why he said everything starts with the mind, and if you understood all what about the mind, then you will understood the memory. But remember that the memory gets is a little bit in his understanding of the faculties. We're not talking about modern psychology. We're just reading him, what he says. The memory leans on the mind. Okay. What does the memory receive? It's the first to receive it is the mind. Its thoughts, its images, its understanding, and then
like the part where it's stored
it is
in a
stored.
way.
Say again?
It's like the part where it's stored in a way, and he doesn't want us to store up these memories.
Yeah, of course. Memory is storage, yeah. It's remembrance. He doesn't want memory is to remember, but to remember what? Things that the mind saw.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the mind saw it. It's then stays in the memory. He says, no, I don't want anything to stay in the memory. And this cannot happen unless the memory be annihilated as to all its forms, if it is to be united with God. Again and again and again. All that depends on us, we can do it. We still need God's intervention. So we need to always have this balance, because if we think that all depends on us and we have to achieve all this and the perfection of it depends on us, that would be too dangerous. You can break the person here. If we think that all depended on us, that's very dangerous, because you can break the person under the weight of a responsibility that's not his or her. But still, we have to do our best, but without breaking our psychology and nerves and so forth. Because the annihilation, there is our part and God's part. 1 and 100. And this cannot happen unless the memory be annihilated as to all its forms, and it is not be if it is not to be united with God. For it cannot happen save by total separation. Se desnuda, se totalmente, stripped completely. The memory needs to be stripped completely. This is what he's trying to say. From all forms which are not God. So I'm not trying to remember, I'm accepting to forget. Let us put it this way. So I'm not making an effort to remember certain things. If I want to draw closer to God, it's better for him to fill my memory rather than me remembering the old apprehensions. For God comes beneath no definite form. You see, he's lifting us now to a different understanding of who God is. God has no definite form. Yes, you can say Jesus has a form, but that's the human part in Jesus. And what about his divinity? So no definite form or kind of knowledge whatsoever, as we have said, in treating of the light of the understanding. Sorry, this is the mind here. So you see, there's as he said himself, the teaching here is similar to the teaching given before. And even the memory is very similar to the mind in this sense. Hence your question, what is the difference then? And since, look here, in the Ascent of Mount Carmel book 2, he used a philosophical reasoning to say that two things cannot fall in the same place. Two things that are opposed, contrary to each other, cannot stay in the same place. Here, interestingly, he's not quoting a philosophical principle. He's just quoting the gospel. It's a bit surprising, no? He's not leaning on philosophy here. He leans on the gospel. Fine. We're reading him. We're not judging him. And since, as Christ says in Matthew 6:24, no man can serve two masters. The memory cannot be united both with God and with forms and distinct kinds of knowledge. In Ascent of Mount Carmel, he said the philosophical principle says that two things that are contrary to each other cannot stay in the same place. Therefore, blah, 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 blah. Here, he says, he's quoting the gospel. He said you cannot serve two masters. It's the same. In the end of the day, he's just following his same reasoning. You accept it or not, that's our problem, but it's the same teaching. The memory cannot be united both with God and with forms and distinct kinds of knowledge, created, and he is uncreated. Remember this also, no? God is God, and whatever falls in the memory or in the mind is created. And as God has no form or image that can be comprehended by the memory, it follows that when the memory is united with God, as is seen to every day by experience, he's talking by experience, him and the others, it remains without form and without figure. That's interesting, no? The cloud of the unknown. No, it's you don't know. You don't memorize, because what are you knowing? Nothing. So God is beyond all the normal knowledge. It's imagination being lost. You see, it's surprisingly, we are talking about memory, and then imagination appears. That's very interesting here. Imagination, I don't remember really, but I'm not sure that imagination appears that much when he studies the mind in the Act of Faith in the book 2. But here, memory and imagination seem to fit together. It remains without form and without figure. It's imagination being lost. He could have said memory, but he said imagination. And itself being absorbed in a supreme good, which means that when we progress, there's nothing to be seen, nothing to be stored, nothing to be remembered, nothing to be imagined. But we are in God. That's the difference here. We are in God. And in a great oblivion, remembering nothing. I knew nothing. This is a quote from, this is me who put this, no? It's from the Song of Songs of Solomon. It's a quote from it. Saint Elizabeth of the Trinity mentions it. Now, in Spanish, in a great oblivion, en grande olvido. So it's like you are like this, no? It's like you are like you received somebody hit you on the head and you're sort of like this. For that divine union voids its fancy. The fancy is the imagination. Its fancy, and sweeps it clean of all forms and kinds of knowledge, and raises it to the supernatural. Translation is correct. So you see, divine union voids the imagination. Okay, we'll leave it there. I won't say more. I just read what he's saying. Now, there sometimes comes to pass here a notable thing. For occasionally, when God brings about these touches of union in the memory, the brain where memory has its seat. You see your question? What's the relationship between no, sorry. It's another place. Where the brain where memory has its seat is so perceptibly upset that it seems as if it becomes quite inert, and its judgment and sense are lost. So let us reread carefully this paragraph. First and foremost, he is talking about touches of union, toques de unión. What are these touches of union? What do they mean? In which phase of growth they do exist? We would like to understand that, because otherwise we won't be able to understand what he's saying. Touches of union, we are still in the phase of purification. Of course, you can object and say, but why are they called of union? Because there are touches. It's not union in the sense of spiritual marriage, constant state of union, but there are touches of union. There are moments where God touches in a stronger way, in a more intense way, the human being in the process of purification. Did he mention touches of union in the previous book, which is Ascent of Mount Carmel? Indeed, he did. You can find this in chapter 26, remember, and 31. Okay? There are communications from God described in chapter 26, Ascent Book 2, and chapter 31, Ascent Book 2. And these are the only communications in the entire book to which he says, yes, he accepts them, and he considers that they are so powerful. He says that one of them is enough to purify or do certain things. So we are still in the phase of purification. We are not talking about, for instance, what he says in the spiritual canticle about the visits of the Holy Spirit during the engagement, spiritual engagement time. No, we are prior to that. It's still the stage of purification. Now, we recently, when we were reading the Dark Night book 2, we recently saw this type of expression. For instance, we have touches of divine love. You find this in sorry, what I'm writing here, Dark Night is in N. So Dark Night book 2, chapter 9, paragraph 3, he uses this expression, touches of divine love, los subidos y peregrinos toques del divino amor en que se verá transformada divinamente. You have also in Dark Night book 2, we recently saw it because we were reading Dark Night book 2 and we talked about it, if you remember, chapter 23, paragraph 11 and the following paragraphs, he talks about substantial touches of divine union. Substantial touches of divine union, in one of which the soul receives a greater blessing than in all the rest. If you remember, we saw that recently. This is in chapter 23, which means we are toward the end of Dark Night book 2. Okay? So we are still in this phase of purification, but maybe towards the end of it. This is me talking here. He doesn't say more to my knowledge. Now, can we find the touches, as he calls them, elsewhere in his works? I just can say stanza 1 in Spiritual Canticle and stanza 8, but mostly stanza 8. Mostly stanza 8. So stanza 8, we are still in the phase of purification, by the way, because purification ends toward 11 and 13. So let us go back. We are talking here, he's talking here about strong graces, substantial graces, touches of God, and he describes them as being touch of union. During these touches of union, which is a strong communication of God, what is the effect on the human being? The effect is sort of like a moment of like you lose your memory. You can reach a moment where you don't remember what happened. You are like absorbed, if you want. You receive the grace, you are absorbed, and you don't recall what happened. It does happen. It's not really uncommon. It didn't happen to me, but I saw people to which it happened. I saw them. So just take it. So the purification happens. Yes, I will give me a second. The purification is happening. There are moments where the communication of God is stronger, but the effect, he's describing the effect. It becomes quite inert, he says, and its judgment and sense are lost. So this means that it could last for a while. We don't know this while. He doesn't say. He says for a while. We will see it, I think, a little bit further. But the effect is visible. It's like, oh, well, where were you? You forgot. I was supposed to do certain things and I didn't do them. I forgot completely. So the person can think that he or she has a bit of an early Alzheimer or something. It's not the case. It's not the case. It could be, and this is me talking, not him, it could be dangerous. That's my personal opinion. If a person is really in that stage, which is a bit, it disturbs a little bit the normal functioning of the day, I think it could be dangerous to put such person in, I don't know, big machinery and cutting things or driving. I think it could be dangerous. Of course, the grace of God is there, the angel is there to protect, but it's better not to it's good to take into consideration then, and it can vary from a person to the other. Yes, please go ahead.
No, just because it said 2 touches of union, it made me think of the effect of the prayer of union of Teresa of Avila, but this is not what he's talking about here.
Now that's interesting. Teresa of Avila in the 5th mentions, or even sorry, in the Way of Perfection, in the famous chapters 30 and 31st, if not before even 28 and 29, because she suddenly takes off, describes something she coined as prayer of union, which is not the prayer of quiet. Prayer of quiet or supernatural recollection is the normal, I would say, response from God to our recollection, to the us drawing close to Him and offering ourselves to Him. But this normal response doesn't stop the mind and the memory from functioning, the consciousness, if you prefer. Now, that's very interesting what you say, because I think it could be, or we can I think I would accept to sort of put them a little bit together. Now, she describes the prayer of union as it contains all the elements of prayer of quiet, plus the fact that the conscious faculties, mind and memory, are taken, which means the person in a way loses control, active control over these faculties. Now, does this correspond to what he's saying? Look, humanly, I don't have any objection to that. I would accept for now. If I find anything against it, I will mention it in the coming lessons. But for now, I am happy to consider that the prayer of union, as described by Saint Teresa of Avila, as similar to these touches of union. Why not? Why not? Both has an influence on the memory, so why not? The question is the prayer of union, and I think this is also beginning of a more serious technical answer, is the prayer of union described by Teresa of Avila, does it correspond to the same phase he is describing? The answer is no. The answer is definitely no, because the prayer of union you can situate it between 4th and 5th mentions reasonably. I think it can't go further, unless, because remember that Teresa of Avila then will talk about ecstasy, rapt, and other things. We need to take into consideration that he's talking about purification, and it's the purification of the upper part of the human being. I don't know.
So then we're already in the
I'm more inclined to something stronger than prayer of union, but because there are other graces described by Teresa of Avila in other places, not in Way of Perfection, where she talks in Life, the book of her life, and the Interior Castle, where she talks about ecstasy, raptus, and sort of flying of the spirit and so forth. I am more inclined to consider that it's a little bit more advanced than this. Much more, not a little bit, much more advanced than this. I think that this is rather, but that's it. I don't want to say more. It's an inclination. It's not a final say. But it's very interesting what you said, because the way she describes it, yes, it affects the memory. Okay. Now, let us continue maybe one or two paragraphs. This is sometimes more perceptible and sometimes less so. You see, more perceptible, less so. Depends. Sometimes it's very visible. As I told you, I saw people who were like absent. It's like, where are you? Hey, it's your turn. And it's just like, oh, sorry. And it was genuine. It is genuine. Sometimes, yeah, people can fake it. Spiritual life is full of surprises. This is sometimes more perceptible and sometimes less. No, maybe some people will say, oh, this is the repose of the spirit. No, I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't go there. Repose of the spirit is rather the prayer of union you mentioned. The people who are used to the charismatic renewal, they certainly heard very well the repose in the spirit. And here I am much more myself convinced that repose of the spirit and prayer of union, which is described by Teresa of Avila, which is prayer of quiet plus a stronger thing, which takes also fully the conscious part, including memory and mind. So you are not distracted. You cannot be distracted in prayer of union because you are absorbed totally. The conscious part is totally absorbed. Then yes, prayer of the repose in the spirit we find in the charismatic renewal, but I don't think it's what he's describing, with all prudence here for now. This is sometimes more perceptible and sometimes less so, according to the strength of this touch. You see, according to the strength of this touch. Strength, I would add also effect and necessity of purification. He's not mentioning that. The effect belongs to the structure, the psychological structure of the person. Again, it's the same business of like when having an ecstasy you fall, and having an ecstasy you don't fall. You continue normally. Saint Teresa of the Child Jesus, except one exceptional grace she receives, she never has ecstasy like Teresa of Avila when she falls. So the question arises, this form. It's like, why does she have this and the other one doesn't? Is the other one less mystical or spiritual than the first? No. We still have ecstasy till today. I saw people having ecstasy. It's possible. But I think, this is my opinion here, I haven't read it directly, but it's certainly there somewhere, that it depends on how the person is made by God, the connection between the body and the soul and the type of person. And let me give you a simple, natural example to understand what I'm trying to say. Some people do faint when a person is under a very powerful shock. They faint. They sort of lose consciousness. And this is like a fuse in the person, which allows the person to bear a very powerful shock. There are people who don't faint. There are people who faint, people who don't faint. I don't want to enter into more details. So in the same vein, I would say there are people who their composition between the body and the soul, how they are made, how strong or less strong they are, more sensitive, less sensitive than others. Some would have the external manifestation of the ecstasy. They will faint, they will fall on the floor, and some others will not. This is why, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping from one thing to the other, in the repose of the spirit, you cannot force everybody to have the physical manifestation of the repose of the spirit. You can have the repose of the spirit and don't necessarily fall. It depends on the people and how their body and soul are combined. Now, according to the strength of his touch, but also the composition of the person. And I said a third thing, I forgot it already. This is sometimes more perceptible and sometimes less so, according to the strength of this touch.
Said, and the need of purification.
Thank you, exactly. The need of purification varies. Remember, he always said that from the beginning. He said we are not all at the same level and need of purification. depending on our life, depending on the sins we committed and the style of life we had. We might have been totally immersed in sin for years, or we can maybe have, like Saint Therese of the Child Jesus, she never sinned a mortal sin in her life. So of course, the need for purification and the form of purification is totally different, and the length and the intensity and so forth. Even though she went through a very tough purification herself. I'm talking about the years prior to 93, which is novitiate and around the novitiate. Okay, so yes, thank you for reminding me that. So depending also on the need. So this is sometimes more perceptible and sometimes less so, according to the strength of this touch and the other things I just mentioned. And then by reason of this union, the memory is voided and purged. So by reason of this union, this touch cleanses, empties, voids the memory. You see? So you need these touches in order to purify the person. And remember what he says in the text we just read toward the end of Dark Night Book 2, and what he says in 26, Ascent of Mount Carmel 26, where he says one of these touches is enough to do a lot of work for that you can in years cannot realize. So these touches purify and empty. So it remains in oblivion, at times in complete oblivion. You see, it remains in oblivion. It's like you're not there, you're not with it. And at times in complete oblivion, like totally absent. It's like physically you're there, but it's like you're taken, and you're not aware. Only when you come back, you are aware. You say, "Oh, what happened?" And you don't have any. You can't recall anything in between. It's like there is a moment completely lost. It's like a real Alzheimer. So that it has to put forth a great effort and to labor greatly in order to remember anything. Okay? I think it's better I stop. Yes, please go ahead.
If you're saying that you need to, well, you do your part to accept to forget, and God does the other part, to which extent does that make sense if then, I don't know, you're a teacher or a theologian and you have to think about these things and you're going through this, how can you then still talk about God? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. It is a very, this time, and it could be long, could be for a few years. This time of purification is a very difficult time. I remember seeing some consecrated person, I don't want to enter in detail, during the studies of philosophy, for instance, because that's the first studies you have after the early stages in consecration, in religious life. And studying was a torture for them. Because as you can see, they are asked to do certain tasks using the mind and memory, etc. And on the other hand, they are going through this moment of, which is incapacitates to a great extent, incapacitates the mind and the memory. So yes, certainly, practically, these persons are suffering. And I'm giving you an example of people who are studying just because they have to study, they have to have a degree. I'm not talking about the teacher and so forth. And yes, they suffered a lot. I could see it. It was very clear. And so, yeah, and even not only that, but they are in a stage, and remember what he's saying. The human being is going from what he knows to something that is beyond the knowledge. So imagine this person having to study or to learn not spiritual things like these ones, but just philosophy, theology, general things and so forth, or sciences. It's like, for them, almost like having to come back in the sense that, and not only that, but also the huge difficulty for them to accept. Why? Because what you're studying has nothing to do with the God who is starting to reveal himself to you. Let me put it this way. God, in his response to the memory, the mind, and the will, is starting to reveal himself to the person in a new way, totally apophatic, totally beyond. It's like you read that he's holy, but now you are facing the holy and you don't have any words. You are like this. It's like beyond your perception, your knowledge, and so forth. So if you are studying, imagine you are studying about God, like the normal theology or even philosophy, worse. And of course you will, the texts are talking about God. It's like an immense suffering, because what you start to see and what you are forced to study do not correspond at all. I'm talking about general theology, general thing. I'm not talking about spiritual, very spiritual texts like these ones. Even these ones can provoke a certain tiredness, because it's like, okay, fine, I want just to do simple things. I want to clean, to wash the dishes, to cook, or to do manual things. Hence, the best occupation for a monk is a manual thing, no? And it's much more adapted to spiritual life. Okay, so yes, there is a huge difficulty, but it depends also on the topic, and depends how the topic is, quote unquote, forced on the person. Yes.
And then once, let's say, they're through this purification, does it then ease again?
Yes, absolutely. But if let me quote John of the Cross. John, you will see it in this book. He will say that on one hand, God removes everything, and on the other hand, he gives only what is needed. So whenever the person needs something, it's given. And apart from that, the person is, as he describes, is a bit like empty or lost or taken by God, occupied by God. So, but he says that. He said, God will remind the person what needs to be reminded on the spot, but there is no accumulation, like the memory storage. There's no storage. It's like you are fed what you need on the spot. But before or after, you might not be able at all to have it. Saint Therese of the Child Jesus has a very interesting observation, but of course she's much ahead of this when she says it. She said, people think that I'm very strong, but of course this is not memory or mind or will. Maybe it's will, if you want. She says, people think that I'm very strong, that I am faithful, that this and that. She says, no, God gives me just what is needed on the spot. He doesn't give me any storage of energy or insight or anything for 3 minutes after. He gives them to me right now. Now I understand that it looks very odd, and from a psychological point of view, it's worrying even what is happening to this person and so forth. I can't say more. I just say what he says, and what can be observed also. Now, does it go back to normality? What the normality would be the absence of these sort of absences. No, let us call them these memories. The person is absent. This, yes, will go, and he says it a bit before, a bit after. He says that these manifestations stop. So there is a certain appearance of normality. The person is united to God, but in the same time, he or she can function normally. Think of Our Lady. Of course, if you want to think of our Lord, but the Lord is another level. But still, he had his human nature. How did he function? How did he work? How Our Lady functioned, how St. Joseph functioned. They are holy people, they are united to God. So they look normal. She had to wash and cook like any person who would do it, a woman or a man who would wash and cook and etc. She did that, but in the same time, she had something that we wish we had, no? So a certain normality, absolutely yes. But how does it function? Here we need to be very careful not to project our own imagination of what holiness is. Let it unfold through the hands of John of the Cross. Okay?
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Sorry I took too much time today. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much, and until next time.